Calling on the Klerk Foundation to retract and apologise following the statement it issued yesterday. The SACC says the statement amplified the former president's position that apartheid was not a crime against humanity, but a Soviet propaganda ploy. Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana says these assertions cannot go unchallenged by the South African Council of Churches. He joins us now in the studio. Very good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Tsepiso.
And thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you for having me.
I'd imagine that this really strikes a chord with the SACC, given the fact that your premises were bombed by the apartheid government.
Yes, I mean, from the message of the South African Council of Churches in 1968, and the call to the people of South Africa to abandon apartheid, this has always been the campaign. For us, it is not only a crime against humanity, it is actually a sin. It is a sin against the humanity of all black people who are treated as subhuman. And I would like to read a short statement, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
I'm saying apartheid made all South African whites and their future generations its beneficiaries in superabundance. Even so, the victims of apartheid accepted a magnanimous approach that does not pursue retribution and wholesale racial blame. But for the Klerk Foundation, representing as it does the last leader of that apartheid regime, to tell us in blind acquiescence to its patron, Mr. de Klerk, that apartheid was no crime, but a Soviet propaganda, is an insult to the millions of South Africans who suffered apartheid and the slap in the face of those who seek justice and peace universally. And in fact, we believe it is, the position itself must be at odds with the spirit of the Nobel Peace Prize, of which Mr. de Klerk is a recipient. I'd like to add that, in fact, the apartheid led to the detention without trial and killing of people in detention. In fact, people like Steve Biko, who suffered shackled, naked, and stripped of all their dignity. And I would like to say as a Christian that killing was akin to the killing of Jesus Christ himself, who was naked and stripped of his dignity for the sake of the truth. I think the Klerk Foundation must tell this to the family of Neil Agate today. They must tell that to the family of Ahmed Timol, to the family of the Mkangans, and all the people who were killed. Mapetla Mohapi, they must tell it to Judge Albisex and Father Michael Lepsley, who were maimed by these bombs, and they say this is not a crime. They have the temerity to say it is not a crime. I would like to close by saying that one of the conditions for it being declared as a crime by the world community is the mass removal of communities who are helpless. And they did this in this country. In fact, no less than 3.5 million people were moved by the South African regime in apartheid days. And you can imagine that mass movement of people against their will, with dogs against them, guns, and bulldozers.
And you know, it's interesting that you should say that. And just speaking about the UN, we obviously had the UN statement following discussions that were still being held in November of last year already at the General Assembly. Definitions such as slavery, such as trafficking in persons. It's interesting to hear them being related to this, crimes against humanity. All of that, one would have to say, happened here in South Africa with regards to non-blacks in this country.
This particular week, on the 11th of February, was the 54th year anniversary of the destruction of District 6. And the people of District 6 were remembering that. These are communities that were settled, businesses that were thriving, that were all destroyed. And people's investments were totally undermined. And what they did in Sophia Town, they destroyed it and called it triumph.
So you're asking them to retract and apologize. Is it for all of it? Because the foundation notes and it emphasizes, as you say, that Mr. de Klerk does take cognizance of... No. Taking cognizance is one thing. To say it is not a crime is another. That's exactly what... Can you do both? Can you take cognizance of apartheid and say it's not a crime against humanity?
I suppose you can take cognizance of somebody stealing somebody's goods but not call it a crime. I suppose you can. You just take cognizance.
So it's an issue of morality versus criminality.
Actually, it's both. In this case, it is a moral criminality. It is a crime as well. It's an immoral criminality. Because, you see, they say they just noted that there was apartheid. They say, hey, you note that somebody broke into a building. You just noted it. but you don't call it a crime.
To your mind, is it akin to washing their hands of any responsibility?
I'm not suggesting that the foundation must take responsibility for all of apartheid.
Well, I mean, the patron, as you say, the former president.
I'm saying because he was not the only person. I mean, but apartheid was a whole system.
Absolutely.
But you see, the Klerk Foundation and its patron represent the last president of apartheid. Therefore, it is the end. If you like, if there were bookends, this is the end point. What they are doing today is to say that end is not recognized.
And by that, when I say they, and I'm speaking about that, the the figure of F.W. de Klerk, as you say, as the head of state at the time, is somebody who they say he's dedicated his whole life to the abolition of apartheid. So
I beg your pardon. Mr. de Klerk did not dedicate his whole life to the abolition of apartheid. Mr. de Klerk recognized, like any good politician, that the moment had come for them to accept that they cannot no longer have that minority rule. I think that was smart thinking, and we accept that. But that does not mean what they were doing was not criminal.
So failure to retract and apologize. What happens next for the SACC? How would you follow?
I can only say that if they don't do that, they will indeed be entitled to their freedom of speech, which our Constitution guarantees them. But I'll also say that they are also accepting that they are alienating themselves from the South African agenda of social cohesion, reconciliation, and social healing. That's what they are doing if they refuse to understand that this is absolutely unacceptable.
This has obviously raised the heckles of quite a few people in society. Do you think it has the potential of undoing some of those reconciliatory steps or efforts that we've taken as a country?
It is painful. I want you to know that both my wife and I were detained and tortured. We were banned for years through apartheid. I grew up with a pass running every time I see police because I could be charged as a vagrant, an idle Bantu, or some kind of good for nothing, some what they call redundancy. You call this and you say it was just something you now note, and all of us live with this. And I'm saying I don't believe that they are totally ignorant, but I think that they're being naive. If so, let them be educated. The time is now. Let us build together. We invite them.
But what would be the source of that naivete?
I'm being generous.
I recognize that.
I'm being generous. I can't believe.
Being generous.
It's very
so tell us what would be the source of that naivete. Let's talk about Mr. de Klerk as a former president, as a head of state of a government that systemized discrimination on that level. What would be the source of that naivete? He had to admit that he knew what happened.
Mr. de Klerk is a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. That puts a huge responsibility on his shoulders. It's very difficult for him to identify with a crime against humanity for which one could easily be charged at the Court of International Justice. I think that, therefore, they have to do everything they can to almost believe that they never were part of it. But after all, it happened in Nazi Germany. You couldn't find a Nazi after the fall of Hitler. We find very few people today who admit that they were even. I know somebody who did. Dr. Johann Haynes of the Dutch Reformed Church, who was gunned down, he said to me, Malusi, I can agree with you in our conversation that apartheid was a sin. I see that truly. But I also, as a leader of my church, which of people like he said, there was in Paris who would have been a very devout Christian, believing that apartheid was all right. I, as a leader of the church, cannot easily say publicly apartheid is a sin because others would be mortified.
So would you say, when you speak about that naivete, Bishop, would you say that the dogma of religion, which was used through the church, sanitized somehow?
Absolutely. You're dead right. In the same way that today, dogma of religion does sanitize patriarchy and the juniorization of women because of the dogma. Let's accept that. Now, I can't say as a bishop, it is not true just because I'm a bishop. It is true. If I'm an honest theologian, I should be able to say, yes, this is wrong. And we should say that, and Mr. de Klerk and his foundation should say so.
I mean, we're all going to die, so this statement I'm about to make is in line with that. So should F.W. de Klerk go to his resting place believing that it was a crime against humanity, as a man of God, as a man of the cloth, would his spirit be at rest, do you think?
I can refer back to Professor Johan Haynes. After he had said this to me in 1990, he later came to say, I think actually I am prepared to say that. And that's when he invited President Mandela to their synod. Do you know what happened to him? He was gunned down in his living room. I know that there are people out there who are prepared to kill, to deny the evil of apartheid. I am asking South Africans, I appeal to South Africans to repudiate the statement of the Klerk Foundation and commit themselves to something that will rally all of us to say apartheid was a crime, and let us build one South Africa for all, one nation.
And of course, we will have more reactions to the Klerk Foundation speech. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana of the South African Council of Churches.
Thank you for having me.